Hey guys, it's Nostalgia. So today we're going to be talking about my Enigma Javazon. So this build is kind of something I thought about in my first Javazon video a while back. I was thinking, how would I put this build together using an Enigma so that I could teleport around to farm items like runes and uniques and so forth more efficiently, while still maintaining decent damage, magic finds, resistances, and so on. And I think I have something together here that I like decently well. So first we'll be going over the Mercenary Gear and then my main character gear, and then we'll get into, well, some more gameplay. Okay, so now I'm going to be going into the skills a little bit. Nothing obviously in bow and crossbow skills. In passive and magic, the more you do here, basically, the more damage you're sacrificing. Unless you're like level 99. I mean, even still, if you're putting like 10 points into Valkyrie, you're sacrificing, even if you are level 99, you're sacrificing quite a lot of damage. So I don't like to do that. And I have CTA, so I don't need the Valkyrie so badly since my Merc is also fairly tanky, as you can imagine. But I like to put one into each of these: critical strike, penetrate, and pierce. Um, I don't Fury as much as most people who play this build do. If I did Fury more, I'd be more eager to get a Razor Tail belt. However, I do have just one point in here, and that's kind of enough for me, given that I only use Fury about like every, I don't know, about half of my attacks are Furies really. It's kind of like I mentioned, just a combination of Charge Strike and Fury is how I like to play this build. If you do Fury a lot more, like if you mostly are using Fury, then I would go for a Titans and High Lord setup so that you're not having to go back to town constantly though. But that's kind of the methodology there, is that you want more Pierce, and how you would want to get that is, instead of more points in Pierce than just one, is instead just getting a Razor Tail belt to kind of hit that maximum Pierce breakpoint. I can't remember if it's 95 or 100, but you get the point. The rest of your points you just put into synergizing your Lightning Fury and Charge Strike. That would be maxing Power Strike, Lightning Bolt, Charge Strike, Lightning Fury, and Lightning Strike. Okay, so for the Merc gear, I'm using an Infinity. The armor is a Fortitude, and the helm is pretty debatable. I'm using a Crown of Ages just for the sheer tanking power, notably the faster hit recovery, and also the damage that I have socketed in this helm using enhanced damage jewels is really nice. The main other option here you could have is a Vampire Gaze, and that's a totally respectable option for this gear slot too. This Fortitude could be a Chains of Honor as the other main option, and if you use a Chains of Honor, then you could use an Andes Visage without even having to have a Fire Res Jewel or a Row Rune socketed in there. Or you could use an Andes Visage with a Row Rune or a 30-15 Jewel. That's 15 increased attack speed and 30 Fire Res or Row Rune in it. And that would allow you to use the Andes with a Fortitude. The weapon really isn't debatable for this build. You just need the Conviction Aura from Infinity for your damage. Insight would be, like, having Meditation Aura would be really convenient on this build, but it's just really not worth giving up all that damage. Okay, so getting on to the main gear, I'm using a Thunderstroke. I'll be talking about increased attack speed first. The Thunderstroke, since it gives increased attack speed on it, with the rest of the gear that I'm using, it means that I don't have to use a High Lords for increased attack speed, which allows me to use a Maras. Now, you could use a Titans if you want to use Fury more than I do. I kind of use Fury and Charge Strike about half and half, so I don't really need all of those quantity and replenish quantity that the Titans has, but it's a totally respectable option if you want to use Fury mainly. But then you would have to use a High Lords with that to hit a decent IAS breakpoint, which I believe is 55. With the Titans, or Thunderstrokes rather, you hit a decent breakpoint at 26 IAS on top of the IAS on the Thunderstrokes, and then the next after that is 50. I'm hitting the 26 using these gloves and this helmet. Now, these gloves ideally would be 320 gloves. I don't have 320 gloves. It took me a while. I was trying to shop for some, probably about 4 hours just trying to shop for them using the Cow Portal and Charcy and also the Anya shopping method. 320 gloves are just hard to get, so I might have them for a future video, but we'll see. These gloves are decent enough for this build. I get very good damage on this setup, as you probably saw by the early part of this video. Um, so these gloves are fine, although ideally they would have resistances, so I wouldn't need nearly as much resistances from my charms. As you can see here, I'm getting some resistances from there as needed, and from my boots. I'll talk about those later. This helmet is really just essential in a number of ways, since I don't have a Griffin's. The ideal slot you would have here is a Griffin's, the ideal item for that slot. Now, if you want to rely on your physical damage a little bit more, and maybe have to use a little bit less potions than I do, you can use a rare helmet like this, which has dual steel on it. And as you can see, I highly suggest putting an increased attack speed jewel in a rare helmet if you do use a rare circlet. You would want it to be a circlet for it to have certain properties like skill levels and faster cast rate, or whatever you would want on it in particular, like all resistances and so on. This helmet, of course, the skill levels are really nice for damage. The increased attack speed gets me to that 26 breakpoint on top of the 15 from the Thunderstrokes. 20 faster cast rate allows me to hit the faster cast rate breakpoint I'm going for, and I'll go into that more later in the video. Well, actually fairly soon in the video. I'm hitting the 68 FCR breakpoint, but I'll get into that more in a bit. 20 poison damage, not a big deal. It just means I don't have to get that from a small charm. And these resistances are very nice. As you can see, my res nearly cap out with this helmet. And I am using quite a lot of that, which is really convenient. Poison res, you wouldn't think is a huge deal. Although I do... The thing is that I like to do bail runs on this character fairly often. So I would suggest getting the poison res to at least 60 or 65 roughly if you want to do a lot of bail runs in this character, because it is a very good character for bail runs. Not like going through the World Stone Keep, but just going straight to Baal and taking out his minions and Baal himself. This character is not as good for like running through the World Stone Keep and killing the boss packs there, just because it doesn't handle souls nearly as well as some other builds. If you want to handle souls better, you need a Griffin's, really. Or just a 20/20 shield, like a Jeweler's Monarch of Deflecting, like I have here. Or just a regular shield, just with 4 5/5 light facets in it. And or an armor that has 4 5/5 light facets in it. Ideally, magic armor like a Jeweler's Great Halberd of the Whale with 4 5/5 light facets in it, but that means you can't teleport because you need Enigma here. Now, Enigma is the essential gear piece that defines this specific build, the teleporting Javazon. The faster run walk doesn't really matter. Obviously, the skills are amazing for damage. The fact that it has 70 to strength means that I have to invest very few points in strength to wear all of my gear. I have a few in there. As you can see, I have 45 base points invested in strength, which really isn't all that much, which allows me to get a fair bit of vitality. Although I need 151 dex to wear the Thunderstrokes, or if you're using up Titans, then you need 151 anyway, although it might only be a smart idea to up your Titans if they're ethereal. So that's just one consideration with this build. Getting into the rings, I'm using a Ravenfrost, and pretty much everything on this ring is amazing. Dex for blocking and hit chance, attack rating for hit chance. Although hit chance isn't nearly as important on this character since your lightning damage applies anyway, I'm pretty sure. Someone correct me on the comments with that about that if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. The cold damage, nice, so you don't have to get that from a small charm. Cold absorb, again, really nice. The main reason you need this ring over any other ring for at least one of your slots is the cannot be frozen. Unless you want to like cham your griffins, which I probably would not do, you probably want either a facet or probably what I would put, which is an increased attack speed jewel in your griffins. Although the ideal jewel would be a jewel with 15 increased attack speed and 15 to all resistances for your griffins, that is. And also this helmet, if you had two 15 increased attack speed jewels and both jewels having 15 all res, this would be much more of an amazing helmet. It's already really good. It allows me to hit the 68 FCR breakpoint, but it's not quite perfect. Going into what I need for the 68 FCR breakpoint for my teleporting, yes, I know, I'm sure I'm going to hear about in the comments that just how slow the Javazon teleporting is. I'll just show it off here. This is the 68 breakpoint. It's not great, but compared to having to walk everywhere, to me it's pretty good. I would much rather teleport at that speed than just have to walk everywhere. So I don't think there's really much of an argument to be said there about not using a teleport for farming, because it's just so much more efficient than walking everywhere. And to get that FCR breakpoint, probably your main option is using a spirit. In my opinion, spirit is pretty much irreplaceable for this build. It gives everything you need. It is just like skills for damage, 35 FCR, which is essential for hitting at least the 48 FCR breakpoint. I wouldn't recommend going any lower than 48 FCR, which is actually hard to do on this build without a spirit, while still hitting the other points like 26 IAS, especially if you're going for 50 IAS and 86 FHR, which actually the shield really helps you for also is getting 86 FHR, because that's what I'm running for on this build, and I get that from the spirit, from my boots, and from the charms here. There's a couple of FHR small charms in here to allow me to hit that 86 breakpoint. But the spirit, it's just allowing you to hit your breakpoints so much, and then it gives vitality, tons of mana for your teleporting, lots of resistances. It's just amazing. It's the perfect item for this build. You cannot do anything else in this slot, as far as I'm concerned, for a teleporting Javazon. Now, since I'm hitting the 26 IAS breakpoint with Thunderstrokes without using a High Lords, I can use a Mara's, like I think I mentioned. This one is pretty good. It gives 29 all res, and that's allowing me to cap my resistances out. 2 skills is great for damage. 5 to all attributes is just helpful so I can have more in vitality. Okay, for my other ring, I don't remember how much I went into this before, but having that extra mana for teleporting is extremely useful, especially when you're dealing with those ghosts in the Chaos Sanctuary that sap your mana all the time. You don't want to have to constantly be drinking mana potions. You want to minimize that a little bit, which is why I like using a Soch for the extra max mana and plus mana. And the skill is just nice for your damage. As you can see, it gives a decent amount of damage, about 100 Fury and about 300 or so Charge Strike, maybe 250. These boots are important for, like I mentioned, the faster hit recovery, for capping my resistances, and Magic Find is just really nice on this build since it's a farming focused build, although it's mainly rune finding oriented. Now let me just go a little bit further into some other gear options. So the Titans and High Lord setup is decently viable. It's fine, honestly. If you can get that IAS from somewhere else, like if you have 2 jewels with IAS and all res on them, or you just don't care about your res, maybe you're mainly using this build for pit runs, unlike what I'm doing, which I'm kind of taking this build in a number of places, so I like to have good resistances, like Bale and Chaos, for example. If you don't care about your resistances and you're just running the pits to farm in, say with this build, then you don't need an all-res jewel in your helm, which means you can have 2 IAS jewels, which means you don't need the IAS from your gloves, which means you can use a lane of hands, right? So what you could also do is if you get a crafted caster Ami, with however much resistances you need for whatever runs you're doing. And really, you want to try to get 2 to skills for the damage. If you can also get one that has enough faster cast rate, I think for what I have, I need at least 13 FCR if I'm giving up a 20 FCR item like this helm or this belt. Say if I want to use a razor tail instead, if you get 13 faster cast rate or more on your amulet, that means you don't need the Arax, or you could use a helm with dual steel, like I mentioned, this one right here. So you can kind of play around with it a little bit, but if you change one gear piece, you want to make sure you're hitting all of the points, which are, like I mentioned, 86 FHR, 68 faster cast rate, or 48 is a little bit more dangerous, but I recommend getting at least 68. The next one after that is 99, which is a little bit hard to hit while still keeping good resistances. And also with Titans, 26 IES on top of the 15 on here, and then 50 is the next one above that, and I believe 55 IES is a decent one to have with Titans here. Did I say Titans here? Obviously this is a Thunderstroke. For options for your boots, like, if you can just make up the resistances you need and also get 10 FHR, the Magic Find isn't really essential, it's just nice to have. So you don't need like super GG boots like what I have here. It's just really important that you have that 10 FHR. And you could also, if you get enough resistances elsewhere, you could use a Sandstorm Trek rather, and get 20 FHR. Now, if you have more than one skiller of FHR or more FHR small charms that you want to use, like, say, ones that have, whatever it is, resistances. Yeah, resistances on them. I was blanking for a second there, but yeah. Resistance FHR small charms would mean if you get enough of them that you don't need FHR from your boots. I have one with mana and one with cold res, so if you can get some with fire, mainly fire res, but fire or lightning res, that means you can do a few different things with your boot slot here, like using war traps for more magic find, for instance. And the switch here, finally, just a spirit and a call to arms. Eventually, I want to get a Phoenix Monarch to use with my call to arms so that I can switch to it and get that redemption aura and fill my life and mana pools back up occasionally just by switching, which would save me some potion chugging and some trips back to town. So let's just do a little bit of gameplay here. I've been using this build to hunt for runes a little bit, and it's pretty, it's pretty amazing. Occasionally I'll actually one-shot Shank with that Fury there. I have done it several times, but you don't always get it, even with the damage that I have, as you can see here, which is pretty good. There's actually one more point that I can get, like I mentioned, in the skill trees there for more damage. And we'll just run Eldritch real quick just to show this off. So I don't one-shot him all the time, but it's pretty close. And, oh yeah, like I mentioned, I'm playing on player 7. Well, you can't see it in this game, but I did say it to player 7 already earlier in the recording. Another thing I like to run on this build is pits, although even with Thunderstrokes, the archers can be kind of a pain, so sometimes I'll avoid them depending on what their mods are. But like I mentioned, once I get an R level on this build, it'll be a bit more damage, a little bit anyway. Make just a little bit of a difference. That's be kind of nice to have. Those fallen guys, I can one-shot them usually, though. Yeah, look at that. Like, guys, I'm not even... It's not like I'm selectively recording all these clips, either. You guys might think, like, oh, he's doing 100 runs to get one where he rolls the max lightning damage. No, like, let's just do a whole pit run just so I can show off how good this build is from a damage perspective. Because, like I said, I am playing this on player 7 difficulty. And what you just saw there is sometimes the infinity acts kind of weird and doesn't proc right away, or maybe it turns off, so you don't always get... like I said, these archers are kind of a pain too. I like to avoid the archers a lot of the time. It's a pain in the ass sometimes. But as you can see, the damage is pretty good. And I get, as you can imagine, a lot of bases on this build. And let's just check this out briefly. If I could just drop some of this other stuff off. It's not F. Darn. I've been getting a lot of bases on this setup, as you can imagine, also. I'm actually going to keep that, just for an insight for one of my other characters, even though it's not F. So as you can see, the archers aren't, like, impossible to deal with, but they're still kind of annoying. You can kill them in a few charge strikes usually, though, so there's that at least. Keppel Snare. Non-F. So that's the build, really. It's a pretty interesting build. It's mainly rune-finding focused, and I just really enjoy playing it, to be honest. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Have a good one.